Tonight, the shock came not from an unexpected leak or a viral headline but from a sitting Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood herself, standing under the bright lights of national television, admitting what many feared but few in power would ever dare to say: the government is failing to control Britain's borders. Yes, the very woman hired to stop the boats has confessed they are still coming. You could almost feel the silence in the room when she said it, that faint collective intake of breath across the country, the sound of millions thinking, did she really just say that? It wasn't just a statement. It was a political earthquake. Not because she slipped up, but because she spoke plainly, and in that plainness, she exposed something much deeper than policy failure. She exposed weakness. A kind of weakness that doesn't just test a government, it tests a nation's faith in its own leadership. And if you think that's dramatic, wait until you hear how she tried to spin it next. Mahmood looked composed, wearing that trained political smile that stretches wider the more serious the mess becomes. She began by telling viewers that failure to get a grip on illegal migration is eroding public trust in politicians. For once, she wasn't wrong. Except the word eroding feels too soft. It's not erosion when people stop believing in you, it's collapse. And the irony. She said this while admitting her government doesn't have control of Britain's own borders. Imagine your plumber saying the leak's worse than ever but here's a bigger bill. That's what this sounded like. Yet, rather than announcing a plan that might actually secure the channel, she reached for the safest phrase in the political dictionary: international cooperation. According to her, only by working with other countries can Britain stem the flow of migrants arriving in small boats. But everyone watching knew what that really meant. It meant Britain can't handle it alone. Instead of building barriers, she's building committees. Instead of tightening the borders, she's tightening the schedule for another summit. Because she wasn't finished there. Oh no, she proudly spoke about a new series of London meetings with her European counterparts from North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia, and Kosovo. She called it progress. The cameras called it another photo opportunity. You've heard promises like that before. They come with glossy press photos, carefully worded communiques, and headlines about new frameworks and joint operations. But they rarely come with results. Because deep down, everyone knows what these summits are: musical chairs with diplomats, and when the music stops, it's the public left standing. Mahmood stood before her European colleagues and declared, the public rightly expect their government to decide who enters and who must leave. Indeed, we do. We've been expecting that for years. Yet in the same breath, she admitted that right now, in Britain, that simply isn't happening. That's not leadership, that's surrender dressed as courage. It's like a firefighter standing before a burning house saying, well, at least I brought a hose. The worst part? She seemed almost proud of her candor. She told viewers that failure to restore order to the borders doesn't just damage politicians but undermines the credibility of the British state itself. Think about that. When ministers start talking about the credibility of the state, it means the crack isn't in the paint, it's in the foundation. And if you thought that would make her humble, think again. Because amid the wreckage of that admission, Mahmood found time to lash out, this time at Reform UK's Nigel Farage, accusing him of turning inward, of rejecting international solutions. In other words, if you want Britain to handle its own borders, you're somehow the problem. Convenient, isn't it? The language of a government that's run out of answers tends to turn defensive. Mahmood insists illegal migration is a shared threat. But shared with whom, exactly? It sounds noble, yet somehow the only thing being shared is the blame, passed around like a hot potato no one wants to hold. Politicians point at people smuggling gangs point to weak borders, and citizens are left wondering who, if anyone, is actually in charge. Because while ministers host these endless meetings to show strength and sophistication, communities across Britain are watching their local hotels turn into holding centres and their public services stretch under the strain. Meanwhile, the Home Office's own data tells a story that no press conference can hide. 22,000 people were smuggled into Britain through Western Balkan routes in just 2024. 22,000. That's not a small figure, that's an alarm bell. And what did we get in response? Speeches. Carefully practiced lines about shared responsibility and collective effort, words that sound like progress but mean next to nothing to families who've seen their towns change faster than any policy plan can keep up. It's easy to talk about unity and partnership from behind a podium. It's harder to stand on the Kent coast and promise the same thing to the people actually watching the boats. This is the deeper wound: trust. Not just trust in migration policy, but trust in democracy itself. The kind of trust that carried Britain through 2 world wars and built an identity of resilience and fairness. That trust isn't just slipping away, it's being traded for PR optics and carefully edited press clips. And it didn't start tonight. Just weeks ago, the same Home Secretary accused asylum seekers of filing bogus last-minute claims, suddenly alleging to be victims of modern slavery just before deportation. That statement drew condemnation from charities, human rights groups, and even members of her own party. They called her words reckless, divisive, dangerous. Her response? Double down. Deny nothing. Defend everything. Yet now, standing under the studio lights, she admits the government itself can't maintain control. So which is it? Are asylum seekers gaming the system, or is the system collapsing altogether? The contradictions pile higher than the policy papers on her desk. You start to notice the pattern. Each Home Secretary arrives with a slogan. Stop the boats. Take back control. Secure the borders. Each leaves with a legacy of speeches and rising numbers. It's as if every failure comes with a new PowerPoint deck instead of a new idea. Politicians talk about international cooperation as though bureaucracy is a life raft, but the British public can see through it. They see towns that no longer feel recognizable, schools and hospitals under stress, workers struggling to find affordable homes, and headlines telling them to remain patient. But patience is running out. And when that happens in Britain, history shows what follows. The people stop whispering their frustration, they start voting with it. No one is calling for cruelty. People are calling for competence. But when leaders equate skepticism with extremism, they miss the heartbeat of the country, the millions of ordinary citizens who believe in compassion and order, not one at the cost of the other. And that is the real turning point in this story, the quiet rebellion of common sense. Every time London hosts another glossy summit, people in Manchester, Birmingham, and Dover ask the same question: when will words become action? When will policies reflect the reality we live, not the one painted in ministerial briefings? You can feel the unease growing, not as anger or hate, but as disillusionment. And that disillusionment is political dynamite. Because when trust breaks, the whole system shakes. It's happened before, in empires, in parliaments, in democracies older than ours. The pattern is old and unforgiving. Governments that lose control of their borders soon lose control of their credibility. When citizens stop believing their leaders can protect them, faith in institutions begins to crumble, piece by piece. And Britain, whether our politicians admit it or not, is at that precipice. So here is the truth that wrapped this broadcast into history tonight. Shabana Mahmood's confession wasn't bravery. It was a broadcast obituary for a promise that defined an era: control of our borders. Her words didn't just describe a failure, they revealed one. Because when a Home Secretary says the state can no longer guarantee who enters or who leaves, that's not an update. That's a warning. If those who guard the gate declare the gate unguarded, then the question no one in government dares ask becomes impossible to ignore: who's really in charge? For anyone still watching and wondering where Britain goes from here, I've put together a full investigation into what happens when trust fails, how nations rebuild when the promise of control becomes the reality of chaos. It's in the video right here on screen, the one about how border failures reshape governments and change elections. Click it now, because by the time the next confession comes, understanding how we got here might be your only map out.